the really bad part of it. I mean, most of what the Human Rights Commissions do wouldn't even bother you, really. But the bit that's really bad, Section 13, that is being dealt with. Yes, it. You've got to be realistic. Knowing people in this government, there are very few people in the government who support that aspect of the Human Rights Commission. It's whether they're going to have the courage to actually. And they will not get rid of them. They will reduce their powers to such an extent that they don't matter. And they're really, I mean, some are worse than others, but some of the particularly bad ones have been trimmed. It's far better, and you really do have to praise Ezra and Mark on this. I didn't have much to do with it because, Ezra is, if you look at that YouTube, the video, when he's in there, and the woman who's in with him, she must have thought, oh, why me? He gets his teeth into her, and you are a little fascist, you are a thug, and he just will not let, and it's wonderful, it's just marvellous to watch, and they could fight back, in Maclean's magazine, of course, and other people. You choose your allies where you can get them, and there are people who are not on my side on all sorts of issues, but on this one, they have been willing to come out fighting. Ezra doesn't talk about all sorts of issues, but on this one, he's very determined, and he was wonderful, as was Mark Stein. The guy who led the campaign against Mark was a man called Mohammed El-Masri. And Mohammed El-Masri became quite well known in this country because of me. He was head of something called the Canadian Islamic Congress. They took that name because it sounded like the Canadian Jewish Congress, which doesn't exist anymore. It's an organisation, a much better one. It was way too liberal, the old one. But its headquarters was in Kitchener. Now, with all due respect to Kitchener, a nice town, national organisations usually don't have their headquarters in Kitchener. It's Toronto, Ottawa. It was him and a group of friends, but he would go to Egypt. He was from Egypt. Masri is Egypt in Arabic and Hebrew. And so he'd go there and say, I'm head of the Canadian Islamic Congress. Oh, wonderful, you represent all Canadian Muslims, marvellous to see. And of course he didn't. But he was all over TV. He was all over the TV. Rather avuncular figure, white beard, jolly. And he came on my show, and he came out with this statement that every Israeli over the age of 18 was a valid target for death. And I asked him over and over again, would you like to edit that? Do you really mean that? Every Israeli, Jew, Christian, Muslim, Druze, gay, straight, male, female, handicapped, pacifist, everyone, yes, mate, yes. So, and my golly, something hit the fan after that. It was all over, international media, and you never see him on TV again. But it was that man who is an aggressive advocate for terrorism, who said that Mark Stein had written an article in Maclean's that offended him. And the Human Rights Commission should have said, go away, you stupid old man. But they didn't, they took the case. And I'm glad they did, because then Maclean's magazine, you will have to print, was it 2,000-word essay without editing. Ken White, who's editor of Maclean's, they said to him, you're going to have to take a 2,000 or 3,000-word essay written by the Canadian Islamic Congress, and you can't edit it. And Ken said, if you were Ernest Hemingway, I wouldn't say, you're not going to be edited. We edit. But he said, I will close the magazine down before you're allowed to do that. Good for them. They fought back and they won. At last, there were powerful, influential people with a voice who could fight back. So it then enabled and empowered people like Scott Brock and others who I mentioned. I had on my show recently a man called Mark Harding. I don't know if any of you saw this particular episode. We had Mark Harding, it's quite a coup. I got Mark Harding and Damien Goddard on the same show. Damien is a man who, he was on Sportsnet. He's a sports commentator, and he tweeted that he thought marriage was one man and one woman. He was fired. He was fired.
Wow.
The other one was Mark Harding, who is a very small guy. He's a nice evangelical fellow, big man, gentle as anything. He gave out some literature explaining Islamic oppression of Christians in the Islamic heartland, and he gave it outside an Islamic school, I think it was. And he was convicted, as far as I know, the only man in Ontario, I think, to be convicted under hate crime legislation, even worse than Human Rights Commission. So he could go to prison. And he was convicted under hate crime legislation. He had a heart attack. And he was given community service, and they said, you have to go to a mosque. And he said, I will happily clean the toilets. I love my Muslim brothers and sisters. As a Christian, I will clean the toilets. And they said, oh, no. You will sit there day after day, and you will listen to 3 imams teaching you about Islam. Oh, but it gets better. If you object, if you say, I don't believe this is true, you'll be reported back and you'll go to prison. Now again, there are hundreds of people this happened to, but this happened to Mark Harding. He broke down in tears on my show explaining this. He said he's kept alive, I think, 50 different tablets a day. I'm not saying the heart attack was a direct result, but it certainly partly led to it. So, yes, there was a time when the Human Rights Commission seemed all-powerful. That's gone. But they're not yet all-powerless. But we're getting there. It's what, a lot of battles, and I hear the language issue I'm hearing from you, we're not winning. On this one, we are winning, but we haven't won.
Just a comment, I'm enjoying Sun TV. Now we finally get it back on Bill. And listening a lot of the news about that honor killing in Kingston. Where do you see that heading in this country of ours?
That case in Kingston of the honor killing is absolutely terrible, and it's not unique. Of course, within Islam, a girl is a property of the father until married and the property of a husband. There are many Muslim families where there's a great deal of love and the woman is very happy. But in the Middle East, it is, in Islamic countries, I can tell you, it is not a crime. It is not a crime to kill your daughter. It just isn't a crime. It's not in the code. It's not in the criminal code. That doesn't mean everyone kills their daughter. It means that if you do, it's not a crime. If you can say it was because honor can only be restored by a blood sacrifice. I mean, it's brutal. So that this happened, it's happened before in Canada. It may happen again. I don't know. But it's absolutely terrible. And again, you'd think there will be demonstrations in every major city by feminists.
Where the hell are they?
In fact, there will be some of them, at least, are angry if you mention Islam because they say it has nothing to do with religion. Well, you show me the list of Catholics and evangelicals killing their daughters for honor killings, and I'll listen to you. Otherwise, shut up. Over here, sir.
What do you know about public monies going to various ethnic groups in support of their culture or whatever?
Public money going to ethnic groups. Well, a lot of it has changed. We have a great immigration minister, Jason Kenney, really good, a great guy. So a lot of it has been cut off. There's still some money. I would reduce government massively. Government is there for defence and a few other issues. I just wouldn't give money. But some of the money given to ethnic groups is obviously far less offensive than others. I mean, if it's a small group of kids in Jane and Finch in Toronto want to set up a black theatre group to make sure the gangs don't get involved, you'd have to be very ideological to say, no, you can't do that. I mean, it's a good thing, good. But a lot of it is very political. A lot of it is extremely political. And only ethnic groups who can shout loud are going to get the money. So
what level are you talking about? This is billions?
And that's no, not billions, and some of it's quite small, but not. But why any? Why any? Canadians have to be treated equally. As a Canadian, you are entitled to, if you lose your job, support from the government to find another. If you're really in bad shape, welfare. Not because you're black, white, no, because you're Canadian. That should be the only qualification. You're Canadian. You live in this country, even if you're a landed immigrant. But not because of a particular ethnicity. And I don't want to rely on this argument, but it has to be said that those groups that came to Canada in years past, Irish Catholic, Polish, Ukrainian, East European Jew, Italian, they weren't given money. They worked hard to become part of the very fabric of this country. And of course in the United States even more so, which is why of course you have a lot of people in the United States, Irish, Jewish, Italian, who get very upset. Because we're not trying to be bitter towards people, but you don't need that. In fact, it holds you back if you want to teach your child Portuguese because you come from the Azores originally, good for you. In your time, on your birth, no one else. That's fine. That's fine if you want to do that. The government shouldn't be involved in that. I mean, government should not be involved in broadcasting. There are two competing broadcasters in Ontario funded by public dollars. And of course, the French language TV Ontario has about 12 people watching. That's a complete joke. Tiny audience. So there has to be a fundamental change in government. Government is not there. I don't know if you've been following in Toronto, the mayor of Toronto is a bit of a bumpkin, to be honest, but his heart's in the right place. For 3 days there have been hearings on the new budget where people come forward and give their point of view. They're all the same people. It's really the same person. They have the same point of view, just the same type, repeated over and over and over again, and they're there every single hearing. Most people don't have the time. They have kids to raise and bills to pay. But all these special interest groups will go along there. You can't cut this and you can't cut that. Well, we can and will. That's the thing, so it's not even governments giving money to various ethnic groups. It's government giving money. Beyond a few fundamentals, government should not be involved. It's not the job of government.
You're right.
Any more questions? Any more questions? I have no more CDs to give, but I can take it. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Getting back to the issue of bilingualism, which affects us here in Ottawa, and you say it's unheard of practically in Toronto and west of Renfrew.
I didn't say that. But...
Well, no, you did, but we know.
I can see how you got a lot of friends arguing this.
What I want to ask you is, would you consider, or your company consider, setting up a series of interviews of people like Marguerite and
No.
Tim to discuss that?
No, I've answered you, no. I will have someone on, but I'm not going to have all sorts. Look, everyone, and I know this issue is really important to you, and I understand that. But a lot of people come to us. We have another interview on Tuesday. We have an Iraqi Christian who has seen thousands of Christians slaughtered in front of him. It's a big issue for him. There are a lot of issues that matter. This one does too. And I can give you my word. I will now I've learned about it, because I knew so little about it. I'll have someone on the show. But I'm not going to do a series of them. I can't guarantee you that.
Because it is spreading. The Liberals in Ontario are doing the very same thing that was done here in Ottawa.
Yeah. Well, the Liberals in Ontario is the most sickening government. You know where they come from, Michael? Toronto. But where I come from, there's a word, bollocks. I think you'll find the Premier is not from Toronto. Where's he from? He's from Montreal. This government, in many ways, is worse than the NDP government. The Bob-Rae's government at least said we believe in something. This government has lied time and time again. And I know McGuinty used to be on my show every week for the best part of the year. He was always on when he was leading the opposition. And this man has reversed his position on so much. Not just one of the most awful things he did. One of the worst things he did. Some of you may have links, directly or indirectly, to the autistic world of autism. These people, the parents, you can sit down now. I'll get you a few moments. The parents of autistic children, remortgaging their houses, losing everything to try and do the best for their kids. I have a personal involvement. My niece is autistic. My sister has a profound autistic child. They are so deserving. McGuinty sat down with them before the election, the first one he was elected, and he said, "You have my word. I will give you special funding for education for your children." And I've seen at a personal level this changes the lives of autistic kids. They can function. My niece would not have been able to leave the house. She's not going to be an academic, but she could function in some job somewhere because of this special education. This is in Britain. McGuinty gave his word. He got into power, and the first thing he did was to say, "Can't do it. Can't do it." And when the parents of autistic children, who are not a radical group, they're people like us, when they were upstairs at Queen's Park looking at him, they've been protesting. He refused to raise his eyes and look at them. Such a man is not worthy of us. Anyway.
I just have one short question.
Yeah.
I'm asking, I'm not telling you. Okay. What can you do for all of us when you return to Toronto?
Well, as I said, as I do for all sorts of people, there are. I know you want me to say this is the only cause for me, but it's not. There are many causes, and I have people on the show who gone through a hell you can probably barely imagine. But what I will do, because I've learned, is, as I said earlier, I will do an interview with someone, maybe you, or ideally an extremely attractive 25-year-old girl. Two 25-year-old girls. Joking aside, the optics of TV, optics do matter,
Yes,
and
it does,
to have someone, I mean, I'm facetious, but someone who can just, the audience will really, they'll listen. So, but you have my word, I'll have someone on to talk about this.
Get Beth on there.
Now, do we have time for another question?
If there's someone that will have
If there are any more, you've already asked one, so let's see if there's another for anyone who hasn't asked a question. They get the back.
I'm always surprised the churches, the Christian churches, don't get involved when all the Christians are killed in another country. You never hear anything from the Christian churches.
Christians killed in other countries, you mean? Well,
Or here.
persecution. Let's look at the churches. I'm not saying this to offend, but I'm not going to not say things because I'm frightened of offending. The United Church, to a very large extent, is no longer a Christian entity.
Yes.
With some exceptions here and there. As a national body, it is pagan. Sorry, but it is. I know there are individual members who are wonderful Christians and some individual churches that held on, but at a national level, the United Church is not Christian anymore. The Anglican Church is dying. It has some good people in it, but now it's become so liberal. They're not going to speak out on these issues. So that's left to evangelicals and Roman Catholics. And they do speak out. I mean, I happen to know the Pope is putting together a commission right now, headed by the former Spanish Prime Minister, on persecution of Christians in the Islamic world. And evangelicals do wonderful work, many of them, on this. But we don't say enough. Christians are the most persecuted people on the face of the earth. The most persecuted group are Christians. China, Cuba, North Korea, entire Middle East, Pakistan. We Christians face hard times in Europe and North America, irritating times, but it's not persecution. It's not been taken away, not been stolen in front of your family. So something is being done. I try to do as much as I can, and it's very moving. I'll be out somewhere. Someone will come up to me. I know they're Arab. I've lived in the region. I can tell, and you just know. And they come up and they get very emotional. Egyptian Christians, and they thank you. Why won't people listen? Why won't? And me, I do what I can, but people will not do enough. They don't do enough to speak up for this terribly persecuted group of people. And honestly, it's going to get worse. Assad in Syria, he's a brute, but he didn't persecute Christians. In fact, they were protected in Syria. He's going to go, and that revolt comes from the Muslim Brotherhood. And Christians, you will see many Christians leave in Syria, and it's 10% Christian. They've been hemorrhaging from Iraq. Egypt could be as high as 15 or 17% Coptic Christian. Many of them will leave, if they possibly can. So it's pretty much open season. Pakistan is a small Christian community, but they're being treated terribly in Pakistan. China is going to be the interesting one because the Christian community is growing enormously in China. Now there is persecution, but it varies. China's like that, isn't it? Sometimes there isn't any, sometimes there is, but you're going to see enormous growth there. But yes, heavily persecuted, I'm afraid. The lady at the back, and I'll come to you.
I just have a statement, and then I'm going to ask you a question to do with the imams here or across the country.
Sorry, the
The imams, they made a statement just recently that there wouldn't be, they would discourage any violence